Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to break down the Premier League games tomorrow afternoon. It is Wednesday evening right now. I was unable to get a video up for the 4-game slate today, unfortunately, as I was a bit short on time and was getting my projections and article ready for number ball. And that's just kind of the way it's been. These fixtures just keep coming and they don't stop coming. And shoot, I think that is the lyrics to a Smash Mouth song, All Star, but correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, 3 more games tomorrow. We've got a 2-gamer on DraftKings, followed by a showdown, a big one between Chelsea and Manchester City. Here's a quick peek at the odds for those matches. Watford, the favorite here, plus 135 over Burnley. Southampton, Arsenal, essentially a pick'em, but technically Southampton are the very slight favorite here at plus 160. And then in that later match, we've got Manchester City as a minus 130 favorite. So a clear favorite, but not necessarily a huge one like we have seen them in a couple matches. So let's go ahead and start with the 2-game slate, and then we'll get to the showdown. I'm going to go through my team level projections, predicted starting lineups, which of course is kind of impossible to predict with this fixture congestion, and then I'll discuss some specific plays and some roster construction stuff as well. All right, so here's the 2-game slate. Arsenal, Burnley, Watford all project almost identical. And then you've got Southampton here about 10 points higher. And look, Arsenal, don't get fooled by the name. They're not a good defense, not in real life, and not for DFS purposes either. Sadly, David Luiz is still suspended, so he will not be playing center back for Arsenal, which probably improves their defense, even if we're talking about Rob Holding, who has not played a lot. He might even be a right back by trade, but anyway, he is filling in the center right now for Arsenal, but not their first choice because Pablo Mari is injured, and I guess David Luiz would be second choice, but he's probably the worst possible center back on the team. And yet he just got a new contract, but that's, I wish I could be terrible at my job and get to sign a new 1-year deal with guaranteed money, but it doesn't work that way. So overall, Southampton do look like they could be the team that you definitely want exposure to, but all these teams are projecting very closely. So I think it's more about just picking out the best overall plays when looking at the total player pool. I'm not necessarily worrying a ton about these matches because in truth, both of these matches could easily go either way because these teams are close enough. The other thing I think is probably worth mentioning is that these expected goal totals are, all just under 1.5. So it's not necessarily a 2-game slate where you're going to see or expect a ton of goals. But then if you look at the cross numbers, that's pretty good. So if we're talking about cash, it's definitely, I think, a slate where you probably want to focus on building a nice high floor lineup. And then while that might apply to cash, the thing with a 2-game slate in GPP is if there's only going to be 1 to 2 goals, you're going to want pieces of that if you're going to have any chance of taking down a GPP. So even though I would consider it, a quote floor slate, I think in GPP, it's more about just kind of packing as much upside into your lineup as possible, and then hoping you get, pieces of the goals and assists that do happen. And this is not to say that there's not some nice floor plays that definitely are capable of getting on the score sheet. So we'll get to that. And then in looking at this Chelsea Manchester City showdown, as we would expect, Manchester City clearly projecting to be the better side to target here. But this is not Manchester City Burnley, and this is not even Manchester City Arsenal. Chelsea a big step above Arsenal in my opinion, in the way they've performed this season. So while I do fully expect Manchester City to win the match, if you go back and look at the prior match between these two teams, Chelsea played them pretty tough. City ended up winning the match 2-1. The reverse fixture is not always the best predictor of what's going to happen in this match, but that seems like a really, likely outcome, that we see a closer game where, maybe City wins 1 or 2-0 or 2-1, or something like that. And I do think, you saw City heavily rotate in their game against Burnley, still won 5-0. And I think they're going to have their close to their best 11 starting for this one also. And so that, just to touch on that prior game with Burnley for a second, that is an example of how much match flow matters, because one of the things I said in the preview video was that, it could be a game where Burnley drops really deep and doesn't give any clear-cut chances to City. And in that type of game, Kevin De Bruyne, who didn't start, but that type of player thrives on crossing and creating chances. But I also mentioned that if City got an early goal, which they did, it just changes the entire dynamic, because then Burnley know they can't just sit back the whole match. They have to open up. They have to try to score. That's what happened. And then that's exactly when City kills you. And that's why City ended up winning 5-0. So City is a team where game flow just matters a ton. So that's what makes them very unpredictable, especially in showdown slates. If they struggle to score early, Chelsea's very capable of getting a goal on the counter, and then sitting back and beating City 1-0. But, if City score early in the game like they did against Burnley, then it doesn't matter that they're Chelsea. City will pick you apart, and as soon as you open up, they're capable of just, putting the hurt on you. So they're just really, a match flow dependent team. And sometimes it's just difficult to predict that. So, all right, let's go ahead and run through the starting lineups. Just kind of go in alphabetical order here. So here's a look at what we are expecting from Arsenal. In terms of set pieces, we saw a 50-50 split between Ceballos and Pepe. If this is a lineup, that's what I would expect. Saka did take set pieces in the first match, but I believe Pepe and Ceballos were both out. I know Ceballos subbed on in that game, but I can't recall how early it was. So these are the two that I would expect to share set pieces. Of course, if both of these players are out, which I find unlikely, then Saka could be the guy taking. Just from a pricing perspective, you really have to pay up for Aubameyang. Obviously, his upside could be very important in GPPs, but I don't think you're going to go there in a cash or an optimal build. Pepe is, a high floor player due to his role in set pieces and his open play crossing. But there's some nice value in Saka at 5,900. Ceballos, a solid floor play, but he does kind of lack that upside that you would want. And then Nketiah, only 5,000, and he could be starting at center forward for them. So that's pretty interesting right there. Tierney and Bellerin, it just seems that under Arteta, which is basically Pep's system from City, they're not doing a ton. So I don't have a lot of interest in them. All right, let's move on. Okay, who's next? All right, Burnley. Burnley's up next. I think the most important thing to note with Burnley is that they have a ton of injuries and they have a handful of players who have unresolved contract issues. And I guess Sean Dyche has actually come out and said that if these contract issues are not resolved, these guys aren't going to play. So I think we're going to see almost the same starting 11 that we saw last match for Burnley. And then the interesting thing is that because of all these injuries and these contract disputes, their bench was like a bunch of academy players. So I think that really hurts Burnley in a game against a Watford team that, they're on paper, they're pretty even. But Watford's going to have the deeper bench just by nature of the fact that Burnley has all these injuries. So this is definitely a game where you could see Watford take advantage of that in the second half. As far as the Burnley plays, Rodriguez and Vidra are kind of your goal-dependent forwards. McNeil is a nice high-floor forward play. He did not do much against City, but that's kind of the story with everyone versus City. So I do like McNeil to bounce back, a guy that does a ton in open play. Then you've got Westwood at 6,200, who will probably take the majority of the set pieces. McNeil might chip in here and there, but Westwood's going to take the majority. As far as the fullbacks, Loughton and Taylor are okay, but they're not necessarily guys that I'm going to target. All right. Here's the predicted Chelsea lineup. I think the big question mark is whether Reece James is able to play. He's had fitness issues. If he does not play, then Marcus Alonso probably has to come in, and that would push Aspi over to the right here. And then they would probably play a 3-4-3. But this is what Chelsea's going to want to play. This is the formation that they played against Manchester City in the reverse fixture. Very defensive. Conte, Jorginho, and Kovacic all playing in the central midfield. And then 3 attackers here. So this is what they want to play. I just don't know if James is going to be healthy enough. So, overall, to kind of touch on this showdown for a second, and I guess I am jumping around a little bit here, but I think it's probably going to be a situation where you want to go 5-1 or 4-2 City. But if Willian's in, he could be taking all of the set pieces for Chelsea. So definitely some value there. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, here's the predicted City lineup. And you could definitely see a rather defensive midfield of Gundogan and Rodri just because Chelsea is a solid team. Do expect Walker and Mendy to come back in here. Do expect Fernandinho and Laporte. Probably Pep's 2 top center backs to start the game as well. No reason De Bruyne shouldn't come back in and start here. He's the strongest City option, of course, taking most of the set pieces. But if Mahrez is on the field, he has been cutting into that share. And overall, Mahrez and De Bruyne are going to be your 2 highest floor players on City. Aguero looks like he's maybe done for the season, so I expect Jesus to start up top. And then, Pep just loves Sterling, so there's a good chance that he ends up starting on the left wing again. But, Bernardo Silva is an option over there as well. And then, of course, if he doesn't want to start both Gundogan and Rodri, then you could see either David Silva or Foden over here. With De Bruyne pushing back. But I think this is pretty close to what you're going to see out of Manchester City. All right, Southampton. Again, I expect a pretty similar lineup to that which we've seen from Southampton in the prior match. I think the biggest news is that Shane Long is in contention now, but I don't know if he's healthy enough to start. So Ward-Prowse took all of the set pieces for Southampton last match, which was definitely interesting because prior to the stoppage, he and Bertrand were essentially splitting everything 50-50. So that's definitely a nice boost for Ward-Prowse, kind of playing in a deeper midfield role. But he's super consistent, and he's priced. He's the highest priced midfielder, but when you look at him in comparison to the forwards, he's reasonable. Bertrand, even without set pieces, highest priced defender, but he does a ton in open play, and I think he's had 10 plus DK points in like 8 of the last 10 games. But I think it is fair to mention that a lot of that production did come when he was splitting set pieces, so maybe a slight downgrade for him. But I still think he's, I'm taking him over Kieran Tierney at 5,500 from Arsenal, absolutely. Armstrong and Redmond, a little bit more boom or bust. Armstrong's been playing really well. Redmond actually had a nice game too. Ings, same thing, goal-dependent forward. But against this shaky Arsenal defense, missing their top choice center back, definitely some merit to Ings taking advantage of that. And then if Long is not fit enough to go, Obafemi probably starts. I think he's at 6,900, which is a little steep. I don't see myself ending up on him all that much. All right, here's the Watford predicted lineup. Deulofeu is out with an injury. Or I think it's an injury anyway. Could be a ban. But he's out. So the set piece situation for Watford, Will Hughes took the majority last match. He's only 4,400, so a really nice value there. And as I mentioned, I do think Watford could take advantage of Burnley in the second half when they're able to bring on fresh legs. And Burnley are bringing on, 19-year-old kids from their academy. So just something to look out for. Decore playing in a more advanced role, but he's a little bit more boom or bust. Pereira did take a set piece, but the thing I don't like about him is that he always ends up coming off pretty early in the match, like 65, 70 minutes in. Sarr, I think, has really started to, very talented player, has started to kind of find his feet in the Premier League. Has had some really big games. I think he had like a 40-point haul in the game prior to the stoppage. So I will throw him right in that range with Pepe and McNeil as like a guy that fills a forward position, has a really solid floor of like 8 points, and then also has that upside. No set pieces, but he's doing plenty in open play, so I don't really mind that he's not on set pieces. One other thing I did want to mention is that among the teams on the 2-game slate, Arsenal and Burnley allow the most crosses and chances created to defenders. So I do like Bertrand and Valeri from Southampton. And then I think Femenia at 4,300 is definitely a solid option here. It's a guy that does play in the midfield sometimes, so definitely has that attacking mentality. All right, let's just quickly kind of scan through the player pool here. Aubameyang and Ings priced way up. They're kind of the highest upside guys, but I think a range that I'm going to find myself on in like a cash or an optimal build is right here where we have Pepe, Sarr, and McNeil. And honestly, given how close all these matches are, I probably lean towards taking the discount on McNeil and Sarr, even though Pepe has half of the set pieces. If you can get to Pepe, fine, but I have no problem with either of these guys over Pepe. Obafemi just feels overpriced. I probably rather have Dini there. If Lacazette gets a start, 6,600, underpriced. I do like Saka playing in an advanced role at 5,900. Of course, he's not defender eligible anymore. Rodriguez and Vidra could see low ownership. They're both capable of a goal, but they are certainly goal dependent. And there's not much down here. Nketiah, though, at 5,000. Early sub risk, doesn't have a great floor, but at 5K, if you get a goal out of him, you're in really good shape. As I mentioned, Ward-Prowse, top of the midfield only pool. Really like him, and he'll be a target. There's Armstrong and Redmond, two kind of upside plays. Westwood at 6,200. You're getting a reliable floor, but he's not a guy that you're going to expect to get a goal. So 6,200 is a little steep if you're only going to get like a 7-8 point floor. I don't know what's going on with Ozil, but he has not seen the field yet for Arsenal. So we could be surprised, but I find it doubtful that he finds himself in the match, and I don't love him as a play anyway. There's Ceballos, 5,500. Could have a roll in corners. You probably get lower ownership and more upside out of Decore. There's Will Hughes at 4,400. I think he's going to be a very popular value option given his role in set pieces. He does typically, get a solid amount of minutes, especially with the 5 subs in use right now. So I think he's a solid option for sure. There's Pereira, but he's a sub risk. Brownhill, negative points against City, but he could be an interesting lower owned guy in GPP at 4,200 in a much easier matchup. And then I'm not really sure if there's much down here. Jack Cork will probably start at 3K if you just need a punt. I'm not really sure what he's been doing. Yeah, not a whole lot. He has these games where he pops up with a shot or two, but you're just using him as a salary saver if you do use him. Really no way I'm going to use Bellerin or Tierney over Bertrand, I don't think, because, of course, Bellerin's a guy that every now and then has a big game, but I think I lean Bertrand in this matchup. Messina feels a little overpriced there. He's probably going to start. Actually, one guy I didn't mention is Holboss. If he does rotate in here, then it's very possible that he ends up taking set pieces, either splitting with Will Hughes or taking all of them. Probably a split. So he'd be a really nice play at 4,400. So it's almost like you could put on that 2-game slate, you could put Will Hughes in your utility spot, and then if Holboss gets the start, you could just throw him in there. And then we're getting down into center back range essentially here. I don't know why Mustafi's at 3,800, but I overlooked Jan Valeri at 3,600. If you need to save salary, not a terrible option against Arsenal, who do allow the most crosses and chances created among teams on that 4-game slate. All right, finally, let's take a brief look at this City-Chelsea showdown. De Bruyne 12K, but if the guy's starting, I don't see how you fade him in a cash or optimal build. Now the discount you're getting on Mahrez is pretty interesting, though. But his minutes are getting managed. I wonder if Pep leaves him in longer here because it's a big game against Chelsea, but a little concerned by the minutes, although, he only needed 60 to get a brace, but that was against Burnley. I think probably the biggest question will be whether you want to take a guy like Willian, who potentially has the set pieces for Chelsea, or if you just want to get another City option in, whether it's whether it's Mahrez or Jesus. Man, that is a tough one, and I haven't really put a ton of thought into this yet. I think I probably want to go Mahrez over Willian if Mahrez is in. If Mahrez is out, I probably want Willian over Jesus. And if Silva's in, then it gets really interesting. So, yeah, that's gonna be a big decision. I think that's kind of a game flow question. It depends on what you think's gonna happen here. Whether you think City's gonna run Chelsea over, or whether you think it ends up being a close match. I think I lean towards it being a closer match, but of course it's a 1-game slate, and anything is possible. All right, let's keep going here. Decent prices on Foden and Silva. Probably Silva comes back in if either of them even start. I think Alonso feels a little overpriced in a game where he's going to have to play more defense than anything. Yeah, I'd rather have the City fullbacks here, especially if Mendy's in. Kyle Walker pretty cheap there. Conte's kind of interesting at 3,800 because this could be a game where he, makes like 4 tackles and has like 7 interceptions. So there is a floor there if you need him as like a last piece in a cash lineup. But then again, you could just get Rodrigo for 3,600 and he's got a little more upside. So yeah, it's like you start with De Bruyne and then where do you want to go from there? With this showdown slate. And unfortunately, I think you're kind of going to be at the mercy of the game flow and where the goals end up coming from. So that's just the nature of showdown sometimes. Yeah, unfortunately overall, I haven't dug in as much as I will, but just based on what I've seen so far, I'm not sure that there's like any huge edges that immediately stand out on these slates. On that 2-game slate, I think, these teams all project so closely that you probably just want to pick out the best plays regardless of what team they're on. With the caveat that I think Southampton will do a lot from a fantasy perspective against this weak Arsenal defense. And then on the showdown slate, I think 5-1 or 4-2 City is probably going to be the way to go because Chelsea the Chelsea options aren't quite priced down enough where they become obvious plays. So, all right, guys, thank you for tuning in. I think that one ran pretty long. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe if you're interested in soccer content moving forward. It is much appreciated and lets me know that you're finding the content helpful. All right, take care. Good luck out there, and I'll see you next time.